Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Nathan, and in this series we are going over all of the updates to all of the core classes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition from the new 2024 Player's Handbook. And in this video we are going to be covering the Cleric. Now the Cleric is one of my favorite classes, and in my opinion one of the more powerful and well-rounded classes in the game, and is a great beginner kind of introduction to full casters. So let us jump in. Here is our agenda for this video. So I'm going to kind of talk about the class as a whole and give an overview and what I believe the role of the core class is. Then we will go through all of the class features from level 1 to level 20. And I've broken this down into 5 level sections to make this easier. Then I'm going to talk about adapting old subclasses. Cleric is one of the classes that has seen a pretty significant change under the 2024 rules. One of the big things they did is they homogenized when all the classes get their subclasses. Under the 2014 rules, clerics got their subclass at level 1, but now they get their subclass at level 3. So I'm going to talk about how to adapt an old subclass to the new rules. And yes, you can use them. There's just a few little tweaks that you have to do. Then I'll talk about multiclassing the cleric in 2024, and then I'll kind of go through and do a summary and give some ratings on the class in different areas of gameplay as a whole. All right, so class overview and role. The cleric is a wisdom primary full caster. What I believe their core role to be, they are a support and durable damage dealer. They are the best armored full caster in the game, and they have a lot of healing and buffing options among their spells, as well as some decent sustained damage options. Probably the biggest weaknesses of the cleric spell list are in control. That said, they do have some really good low level control spells that upcast well, but these spells aren't as powerful as some of the big concentration spells a lot of the other full casters get. So that is the main weakness of the cleric when it comes to spell casting. But that said, they are typically better off defensively than pretty much just about every other full caster, at least without spending resources. The cleric is also highly flexible and is one of only a few classes in the game that's able to fully swap out their spell list every long rest. The other one is druid. Everyone else either can only swap one spell on level up, or maybe one spell on long rest in the case of a class like the paladin. So this is something that makes the cleric overall, they are very forgiving, and in my opinion, the most beginner friendly full caster. And one of the reasons for this, again, is that ability to change your spell list out every long rest. As a cleric, you are free to try out all of the different spells on your list, and you're not really punished for making the wrong choice or a choice that was bad. If you try a spell and don't like it, you can just swap it out and not use it again. All right, here is the class table for all of the cleric's features. The prepared spells, they have kind of homogenized wording in the new edition. It used to be prepared or known based on what kind of caster you are. Importantly, the number of spells you can prepare now scales directly with your class level, and not with your class level plus your wisdom modifier like it did before, and it's a very flat curve. This is actually the same amount of prepared spells as the bard that we covered in the last one of these videos did. Probably the single biggest change to the cleric progression as a whole is getting your subclass at level 3. And generally speaking, with the prepared spells, the cleric actually has less spells prepared at higher levels than they did before. In terms of features that are new, there are only 2. These are Divine Order and Seer Undead. Now, you might notice that the Destroy Undead feature that they had under the 2014 rules is gone. This has been replaced with Seer Undead. And Divine Order is kind of something to cover up an aspect a lot of the level 1 cleric subclasses had, now that the cleric subclass has been moved to level 3. In terms of things that have changed, so everything I've put in a blue box here is something that they have changed. So again, the whole prepared spells thing, it has changed. It used to be your cleric level plus your wisdom modifier. The channel divinity progression has changed. You generally have one more charge at all levels so that you would have it. The cleric spellcasting, the main change here is in that ritual casting has changed, so they don't have the ritual caster tag anymore. Anyone that has a spell that has the ritual tag can cast that spell as a ritual. You don't get your Cleric subclass until level 3. As for Blessed Strikes and improved Blessed Strikes, these used to be things that were tied into your subclass, but now they're tied into the core class. And Divine Intervention and the Capstone Greater Divine Intervention have seen significant changes. They're much better now, by the way. Let's go into our class features from levels 1 to 5. So the Cleric, their primary ability is Wisdom. This is not something that has changed. This is something that is just stated as, this is the thing that you need to meet to have a 13 in to multiclass into or out of the Cleric class. Their hit dice is a D8. They're proficient in Wisdom and Charisma saving throws. They get 2 skills from the following list: History, Insight, Medicine, Persuasion, and Religion. They are proficient with simple weapons, no tool proficiencies, and they are proficient with light armor, medium armor, and shields. This is the same as it was under the 2014 rules. Now, in terms of level 1 features, the first one that we get is Divine Order. And this is a new feature that, in my opinion, is kind of meant to allow you to customize your character. And this is something that uncouples armor and weapon proficiencies from your subclass. So you can choose one of the following options. You can choose either Protector, which gives you proficiency with martial weapons and training with heavy armor. So if you want to be more of that frontline, more martial cleric, this is a way to do that. The other option is Thaumaturge. So this gives you 1 additional cantrip off the cleric list. And additionally, you get a bonus to your Arcana and Religion checks equal to your Wisdom modifier. Now this is something I actually really like, particularly on Thaumaturge, this skill bonus. Historically speaking, at least for myself and a lot of other players, clerics would often neglect taking proficiency in Arcana or Religion as skills because you usually just dump intelligence. Even though in concept and kind of the fantasy of a cleric, you should be good at both Religion and Arcana. So Thaumaturge actually goes a long way to help with that, because now the cleric should actually be somewhat decent at these skills. Next, at level 1, we get our spell casting. So our primary ability is Wisdom. We will use our Wisdom modifier to determine our spell save DC as well as our spell attack bonus. We can use a holy symbol as our casting focus. And importantly, holy symbols from the equipment chapter, we know that you can mount them on a shield or potentially wear them like around your neck on your armor. You don't necessarily have to hold them. They get 3 cantrips and can replace 1 for each level up, and you can prepare 4 spells, and again you can replace any and all of your prepared spells on every long rest. From here on out, I will track the spell casting progression at the bottom of the page. It's going to be over there and down. Importantly, you used to only be able to swap your cantrips out whenever you got an ability score increase, and the ritual caster thing is gone, as anyone who has a spell that has the ritual tag can cast that spell as a ritual. Next up at level 2, we get our Channel Divinity, and this has seen a slight change. We now get 2 uses per long rest, and we recharge 1 charge per short rest. So this is 1 extra charge that before you just got 2. But importantly, well, actually, it was 1 at level 2. But importantly, in the past, you got back all of your Channel Divinity on a short rest. Now you only get back 1. From levels 1 to 5, this won't actually be any difference. You'll still get back 1, but you have an extra 1. And we have, there's a couple things that all clerics can do with it. The first one is Divine Spark. This is new. So as a magic action, you can pick a creature you can see within 30 feet of yourself and roll a d8 and add your Wisdom modifier. You either restore that much hit points to the target, or you force it to make a Constitution save. On a fail, it takes radiant or necrotic damage, your choice, equal to the amount you rolled, or half on a success. And this, the number of d8s you roll increases at cleric levels 7, 13, and 18. Now, this, I don't think it's not like particularly strong, but one of the cool things that this does is it can potentially save you spell slots. It's not a particularly powerful heal. It's actually worse than the new buffed Healing Word and Cure Wounds. But again, it doesn't take a spell slot. It does a little bit more damage than cantrips at this level, but it's not really going to be competitive with damage for your cantrips. But it is an interesting thing that you can potentially use. And it's not technically casting a spell, even though it is using the magic action. The other thing that all clerics can do is turn undead. This is something that all clerics have had that's kind of a core aspect of their class. It has seen a few minor changes, so let's read through what it does. So it's a magic action now, and then each undead of your choice, which means if there's friendly undead, you don't have to turn them. They will make a Wisdom save if they're within 30 feet. On a failure, the creature is frightened and incapacitated for 1 minute, and all it can do on its turns is try to move as far away from you as possible. This effect ends early if the creature takes any damage, if you're incapacitated, or if you die. So before it gave a condition called turned. The turn condition is gone, but they've basically encompassed it into this frightened and incapacitated. It's kind of a minor reword, but it's functionally basically the same. All right, at level 3, clerics get their subclass, which was before at level 1. The subclasses presented in the 2024 Player's Handbook are the life domain, the light domain, the trickery domain, and the war domain. Now, these are all subclasses that were in the original 2014 Player's Handbook, and they've all seen a few kind of minor tweaks. But all of these classes have a core feature. They have a subclass spell list, so you get 2 spells of every level from level 1 to level 5 that are always prepared once you reach those levels, and they don't count against the number of cleric spells you can prepare. So that's why our prepared spells over there has bumped up to 6 plus 4. Those plus 4 are going to be our subclass spells. All of the subclasses also get you an additional way to use your Channel Divinity based on the flavor of the class. Now, importantly, all of the class features from all of these classes that would give you armor or weapon proficiencies are gone because those have been rolled into your divine order choice at level 1. And yeah, it's generally just a few very minor changes due to your subclass coming level 3 instead of level 1. At level 4, we get our first ability score improvement or feat, and clerics follow the regular feat progression. Now, it's important to note that your level 19 ability score increase is called Epic Boon in the book, but it's essentially just another ability score improvement. The epic boons are feats which have a prerequisite of character level 19. It's important to note if you're building a multi-class character, you don't actually have to be level 19 in a class to get an epic boon feat. You just have to be at least character level 19 to qualify for that when you get an ability score increase. So if you build a character that by level 20 it has 16 levels in one class and 4 levels in another class, say, if you got your level 16 and your level 4 at characters level 19 and 20, you could potentially pick 2 epic boons because you would be at least character level 19 at that time. So just a little interesting thing that you can do there with multiclassing and the epic boon feats. At level 5, clerics get Seer Undead, and this is a replacement for Destroy Undead. Now, Destroy Undead, it was cool, but in a lot of campaigns, you wouldn't really see much impact for it. Basically, what Destroy Undead did is if any undead that failed their save against your turn undead would be instantly destroyed if they were a certain challenge rating or less. But what this new feature does is that whenever we use our turn undead, we can roll a number of d8s equal to our wisdom modifier, a minimum of 1, and add them all together. And then each undead that fails its save against turn undead takes radiant damage equal to the total, and this radiant damage doesn't end the turn effect. So one of the cool things about this is that yes, it damages them. It could potentially destroy weaker undead, much like Destroy Undead could, but it also still has an impact against higher challenge rating undead that you're probably going to be running up against as you get into higher levels. All right, moving on to level 6, we now get a 3rd Channel Divinity charge per long rest, and we get a subclass feature. There's no changes from the 2014 rules at this point other than the extra Channel Divinity charge. At level 7, our Divine Spark damage bumps up to 2d8, and we get the Blessed Strikes feature. Now, this is a replacement to the old subclass feature that you got at character level 8. And if you're using an old subclass, you won't get their level 8 feature, as you're going to be getting this one instead. So you get a choice here between Divine Strike and Potent Spell Casting. Divine Strike says that once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with an attack roll with a weapon, you can cause the target to take an extra 1d8 necrotic or radiant damage, your choice, and you can choose every time that you activate Divine Strike, so it doesn't have to be necrotic all the time or radiant all the time. As for potent spellcasting, you can add your wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with any cleric cantrip. Importantly, the choice that you make here will affect what you get at character level 14, and I think it's great to have a choice. In my opinion, potent spellcasting is generally the stronger option here. 1d8 is an average of 4.5 damage, and your wisdom can potentially be up to +5 or higher, so it's going to be more damage. And clerics generally should not be making weapon attacks. You're probably going to be better off with cantrips, as cantrips damage scales better than making weapon attacks in general. Level 8, we get our 2nd ability score increase or feat. This is when the old cleric subclasses got their Blessed Strikes equivalent, but again, that is gone because it's been moved back to level 7. At level 9, there are no class features that clerics get other than their 5th level spells, and this is the last set of subclass spells that you get, which is why we have that plus 10 over there. At level 10, clerics get their new and improved Divine Intervention. So this is something that has been reworked and is much stronger. So what does it do? As a magic action, we can choose any cleric spell of 5th level or lower that doesn't require a reaction to cast. Importantly, your subclass spells are cleric spells, so you could potentially pick one of those if those aren't on your core list. And as part of this same action, we can cast that spell without expending a spell slot or needing any material components, and we can only do this once per long rest. So functionally, this can cast any spell of 5th level or lower, basically at level 5. So it's essentially an extra 5th level spell slot. It also bypasses any expensive material components, and it always sets the casting time to an action. And you don't even need to have the spell prepared. It just has to be a cleric spell. So there's some really powerful things that you can do with this. Let's talk about just a few of the spells that are actually really powerful with Divine Intervention. First up is the Hallow spell. The Hallow spell normally takes a full day to cast, and it has 1,000 gold pieces worth of incense that it consumes every time. Its effect doesn't require concentration, and it lasts until dispelled, so you can basically do this permanently in 6 seconds instead of 24 hours. It has a lot of powerful effects that it sets up in its area, including disallowing entry to certain kinds of creatures, and then you can pick another benefit, which could include damage resistance for the party, or damage vulnerability for all enemies of a few certain types, to a damage type of your choice. And you can use this to quickly set up a big damage combo or something else very quickly. And this is something that is very powerful in the right situation. Another option is simply Prayer of Healing. The new Prayer of Healing normally takes 10 minutes to cast, and if everyone is in range, which is 30 feet, you can heal them all for a 5th level casting of it, which is 5d8. But it also gives the benefit of a short rest. Now, if you are able to give everyone in your party the benefit of a short rest in combat, they can spend hit dice, so they can probably full heal, and it'll actually refresh the resources of a lot of different classes. Like if you have a fighter, they'll get back their action surge, and they'll get back a use of their second wind. You yourself will get back a use of Channel Divinity. Overall, very powerful to cast this 10-minute spell for just an action. Another example is Raise Dead. It normally takes an hour to cast to bring someone back to life. You could do it instantly, just like that. And it normally consumes a 500 GP diamond. You won't need that. Now, to be honest, you're probably not casting Raise Dead in combat. But if you do it with Divine Intervention, it'll save you time, it'll save you money, and you don't necessarily have to prepare Raise Dead. So overall, like one of the things I didn't like about the old Divine Intervention is you had to roll the dice, and it was a percentage chance to work based on your cleric level. The new one, it always works, which is amazing. This change is probably the single most powerful thing that they gave to clerics in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and it is a big deal as you get into high level play. This is a very powerful feature. Moving on to level 11, there are no features here other than 6th level spells. And again, the 6th level spells for Cleric are pretty decent, but unfortunately you can't Divine Intervention these to get around material components costs, which is great, which would be nice with something like Hero's Feast, for example. Level 12, all clerics get is their 3rd ability score improvement or feat. Your prepared spells, you don't get any new ones here, and you don't get any new spell slots. This is a kind of a sucky level for a lot of casters. Level 12, but it is what it is, and a cleric is very powerful at this point because again you have Divine Intervention. At level 13, the damage of our Divine Spark or Healing bumps up to 3d8, and there are really no other features here aside from 7th level cleric spells, and this is the same as it was in 2014. At level 14, we get improved Blessed Strikes. Now, this used to be just a note in your 8th level class feature, but now it's a core class feature. So the option you chose at level 7 improves. If you pick Divine Strike, the extra damage you can apply once per turn increases to 2d8. But if you picked Potent Spell Casting, when you cast a cleric cantrip and you deal damage to a creature with it, you can grant yourself or another creature within 60 feet of you temporary hit points equal to 2 times your Wisdom modifier. This is just a further incentive to pick Potent Spell Casting. I feel like you're going to be doing more damage with cantrips than with weapon attacks, even with Divine Strike active at this point. And this should be 10 temporary hit points. You should have your Wisdom capped by this point. So Again, I lean toward potent spellcasting as the better option, but if you have a more martial-oriented cleric, Divine Strike could be useful. At level 15, there are no class features, but we do get 8th level spells. This is the same as before. At level 16, it is the 4th ability score improvement or feat. Yeah, that's about it. Same as before. At level 17, we get our final subclass feature, which is the capstone. These are usually pretty powerful, but there's nothing else that has changed here since the 2014 rules. This is also when you get 9th level spells, and of course those are very powerful. And having the subclass feature line up with when you get 9th level spells is a great power boost. At level 18, we get our 4th and final channel divinity charge per long rest, and we get 4d8 on divine spark. Yeah, it's and you don't get any features here. It's not that big of a level, but we are at potentially 30 total prepared spells between our class and our subclass at this point, so that's kind of nice, I guess. At level 19, we get our 5th and final ability score improvement, and you could potentially take an epic boon here, of course, and there are no changes at this level from the 2014 rules. Finally, at level 20, we get our class capstone, which is called Greater Divine Intervention. What this did under the 2014 rules is it made it so your Divine Intervention always worked. But it already always works now. And what it does in the 2024 rules is that when we use our Divine Intervention feature, we can choose the Wish spell. And if we do that, then we can't use Divine Intervention again until we finish 2d4 long rests. This is really, really strong. This gives you the ability to instantly cast any spell in the game that's 8th level or lower as an action from anybody's spell list in the game. This could include something like, say, Simulacrum. You can make a copy of your Cleric, and then, if you wait until your... well, actually, the thing is, if you do that, the Simulacrum is an exact copy of you after you cast your Greater Divine Intervention, which means since Simulacrum can't benefit from rests, they wouldn't be able to Divine Intervention themselves. But still, you can get a copy of yourself with all of your other spell slots, and that's still very powerful. Having an extra copy of yourself for... about a week in game is pretty powerful. And yeah, there's just a lot of very interesting things that you can do with this because you get Wish. All right, moving on from class features, let's talk quickly about how to adapt an old subclass. It's pretty straightforward, but I just want to go through, and there's 3 main points you just generally need to follow. So you can use an older unupdated subclass. Here's how. So first, we don't get our subclass until level 3, and we get all the features that the subclass would have up to that point, such as subclass spells, subclass channel divinity, and other class features when you're at level 3. Importantly, though, ignore any additional proficiencies with armor or weapons that subclass would give you, as these are covered by your level 1 Divine Order class feature. Also, ignore any your 8th level subclass feature that gives you like Blessed Strikes or Potent Spellcasting. This is covered by the new core class Blessed Strikes at level 7 and the improved Blessed Strikes at level 14. And that's it. That's how you adapt an older cleric subclass, such as Order Domain out of Tasha's and that kind of thing. All right, let's talk a little bit about multiclassing the cleric. Now, some things have changed with this, and we will go through those here. So first, the minimum set requirement to multiclass into cleric or take a level outside of cleric is to have a 13 or higher wisdom. And if it's you take a level in cleric and it's not your first class, you get proficiency in light armor, medium armor, and shields. Now, the important thing here is that clerics used to get their subclass at level 1. They don't get that anymore, but this subclass, taking a cleric level as a multiclass is still very strong. In particular, I think cleric actually goes best with sorcerer and wizard. And let me explain. So for a character who's mostly cleric, a single level in these other classes offers defensive and utility spells clerics lack, which can kind of fill their defensive weaknesses, even if you just take a single level. If you're going to go mostly the other class, just a single level of cleric offers armor and shields, healing abilities, and buff options. You can also, since you get Divine Order at level 1, and you can get heavy armor and martial weapons from this if you want, taking a level in cleric is the only way to get heavy armor proficiency without taking a feat if your starting class didn't give you heavy armor. And as for other classes that Cleric can work with, it can work with Bard, it can work with Druid, it can work with Fighter, it can work with Monk, it can work with Ranger, it can also work with Rogue, and it can even work with Warlock. Now, I think these are all the same classes I thought it worked with before in 2014. It's not quite as strong as all of these with just a single level because you don't get your subclass anymore. But still, some of these classes like the armor, some of them like having access to spells. I think wisdom is probably the most desirable mental stat for general use. So it's really not that difficult to meet a 13 wisdom minimum to be able to multi-class into cleric. And you know, the druid and the ranger and the monk are already wisdom classes anyway. If you're going to be a mostly cleric and you're more martial oriented, you can potentially get extra attack from something like fighter, monk, or ranger. And an interesting thing with the druid actually has a feature level 1 that can actually stack with thaumaturge to give you double your wisdom modifier to arcana checks, among other things. And so it's just overall, cleric is very flexible and can go well with a lot of the classes in the game. All right, let's move into our summary and ratings. So for these, I go through a bunch of categories and I give the class a rating out of 5. So first up is offense, and I give the cleric a 3 out of 5. This is the same as the rating I gave them under the 2014 rules. They have decent sustained damage with a lot of their spells like Spirit Guardians and that kind of thing. And they haven't really gained a whole lot that helps or hinders this. And generally speaking, they are a pretty effective damage dealer, although they're not insane, but they are quite good. In terms of defense, I give the cleric a 3 out of 5 here. You are slightly better with your level 14 potent spellcasting and your new divine intervention, but they're generally speaking about the same as before. They're relatively beefy thanks to a D8 hit dice, as well as they are the best armored full caster in the game. The main thing that holds them back from being better defensively is lack of defensive reactions and that kind of thing. But you can pick these up from multiclassing and potentially things like origin feats like Magic Initiate Wizard, which is really good on clerics. As for their control abilities, I give them a 3 out of 5. Again, they don't have nothing, but they really lack kind of the high-level powerful control effects that other full casters have. Namely solid concentration options that deal good control. And this is kind of a compromise for their abilities to do damage and kind of buff and heal. This is why their control options are generally more limited and weaker. In terms of support, this is your ability to kind of help your allies and boost them, and I give the cleric a 4 out of 5 here. They are a great support. They've got a lot of good buffs. They have healing. They don't have quite the kind of skill and out of combat boosts like a bard would, and they have gotten some nice boosts through some of their features, like again that potent spell casting at level 14. But there's nothing that's like super over the top that has me want to change this rating from where it was in 2014, which was 4 stars. Next up is skills. This is kind of a measure of how good they are at skill checks. Give them a 3 out of 5, which is the same as I gave them in 2014. They've seen a slight buff if you pick Thaumaturge at level 1, as that will boost your Arcana and Religion. But again, that's not really enough to shift their rating. And the main reason why they're better than a lot of like a baseline class is because of spells like Guidance and Enhanceability and other kind of soft things that spells can do that skill checks alone can't necessarily do. And finally is complexity. Now, this is a rating I do where a low complexity rating means the class is relatively easy to play, like a barbarian, and a high complexity rating means the class is complex and difficult, like the bard we saw in the last one of these videos. I should have replaced that thing in the upper right corner, but that's okay. And the complexity of the cleric hasn't really changed that much. You still have a few additional decisions based on things like your divine order and your potent spellcasting and that kind of thing. But generally speaking, the cleric is the least complex full caster, and again, is my opinion, the most beginner friendly. So thanks for watching. This has been our kind of overview on the cleric. Overall, I really like the changes to the cleric. They weren't super huge, but I feel like they fixed kind of a lot of clunky abilities like destroy undead and things like that weren't really very useful. And they reworked these abilities that kind of felt bad. Like now we have Seer Undead instead. I feel like the new Divine Intervention is amazing. It's also very powerful. I think your Channel Divinity feels more impactful and is more usable, especially early, thanks to the extra charges. And I really like how your Divine Order and your Blessed Strikes are divorced from your subclass choice, which means that you can you're free to build your character how you want, and not necessarily how your subclass dictates like what your armor should be and that kind of thing. So our next class overview is going to be on Druid. Thanks for watching. Once again, my name is Nathan, and I will see you next time.